Hey guys and gals, today on Face Off we are going to be asking which classic Doctor Who masterpiece is better, Genesis of the Daleks or The Caves of Androzani, both of which have been considered the best classic Doctor Who story ever made, both of which have won polls to that effect. Both are masterpieces and are examples of why Doctor Who is phenomenal and one of the best science fiction series and franchises ever made. But which one is better? For me, the answer is easy. Probably far easier than it should be, and that is Genesis of the Daleks. Genesis to me is the quintessential Doctor Who story, especially classic Who story. It is, I think Genesis is kind of that story where if you meet someone who only watches the modern series, you're like, have you watched classic Doctor Who? Why, no, I need to get into it, but I don't know which one to watch. Genesis. You need to watch Genesis. That's the go-to. How many people are like, I've never seen a classic Who story. Oh, go watch The Caves of Androzani. Probably not as often, but how many people would go, Genesis, you need to see Genesis? Everybody needs to see Genesis. If you're a Doctor Who fan, you need to see Genesis. It's just one of those essentials you need to watch. It not only does it introduce Davros, this is my favorite Davros story, he's just the best here. Tom Baker is great. Every interaction between Tom Baker and Davros is great. Harry and Sarah are great. I love how Sarah's kind of split off from the group, having to do her own thing. The Daleks themselves aren't in it a whole lot, but the shadow of the Daleks are over this whole story. This large shadow they kind of cast over everything, because we know how dangerous the Daleks are, so we know more than most of the characters in the story do. We know the impending doom that's coming. So their shadow looms heavy over it. And then the little bit of time we do get with them is amazing, especially how they turn on Davros at the end is just perfect. That's exactly what the Daleks would do, and it just puts that exclamation point on a good story of the Daleks already being what we know the Daleks are, which is exactly what they were made to be. So I really enjoy that. I mean, another reason I like Genesis better is I just like the Fourth Doctor a lot better. You know, Caves of Androzani is not my favorite Davison story. It's probably my third favorite Davison story, but it is Davison's best performance in the role. Peter Davison is just so good as the Doctor in Caves. And Caves is a great story. But to me, Tom Baker is just such a better Doctor, and he is just magic in this story, as he's magic in most of his stories. And plus, I think he has better companions. I'm not a big fan of Perry, whereas I love Sarah and Harry. And I just like the Daleks more than what's going on here. I just find it more of a quintessential watch. You know, I don't know. What's a good classic Dalek story? Genesis. You should watch Genesis. What's a good Tom Baker? Genesis. You should watch Genesis. I mean, it's got the best companion in Sarah. Harry's great. It's got the best Doctor in Tom. It's probably the best classic Dalek story, except maybe Power. I think I might put Power at 2 and Genesis at 3 on my favorite Dalek stories list. It's so just essential to Doctor Who, and I absolutely love it. You have Tom's Do I Have the Right speech, which is fantastic and is one of the best speeches Doctor Who's ever had, and another one of those just essential things Doctor Who fans need to see. It's just that story you point to, you know, when you're pointing to people who only watch the modern series. This one. Watch this one. Yeah, you should see Caves. You should see several of them. Curse of Fenric, Power of the Daleks, a lot of them. But you got to see Genesis. Everyone has to see Genesis. That needs to be a rule. Everyone has to see Genesis. I mean, I like Caves, but again, being more of a Tom Baker fan, I can name a dozen Tom Baker stories I like better than The Caves of Androzani. I know, I've made a list. And it's not to say that they're objectively better, but just that I like more. That I like watching more, but I still also think Genesis is objectively better, especially because the only complaint I ever really hear about Genesis is that some people think it drags a little in the middle, but there's an omnibus version, and some people like the full version. They don't think it drags at all. I don't think it drags. I like the full version, but you actually have an option to where if you think the regular version of Genesis is a little overly long, you can watch the omnibus version, which cuts out, what, about 20 minutes or so? Or a little more, I forget exactly. And again, you're good, so you can watch that streamlined version of it with no filler. Well, let's see what you guys had to say on this. Let me pop on the eyeballs here. So, let's do one more last refresh just to see if it's changed any. Now, I left this poll up for about a week, actually. I was really curious to see what it would do, see how close it would be. we have 164 votes. And of 164 votes, this one was a little more lopsided than I expected. 60% of the vote was for Genesis, only 29% for Caves, with 12% thinking they're both overrated. That's also surprising. 12% think they're both overrated. I expected this one to be a little closer. It could be just because, again, 164 votes isn't a lot. It's a small channel. I did not expect Caves to only get 29% with the reputation it has. The interesting thing is I think the comments are actually more in favor of Caves, though. So let's pop down here and see what some of y'all said. Let's see. JLBWHO, who is not only one of my subscribers, but one of my patrons as well. Hello. Said, as much as I enjoyed Genesis, I'm gonna go with Caves. It's such a triumph of an episode. Easily one of the best regeneration stories we have. I agree. Perfectly acted by Peter Davison. I agree. Nicola Bryant and the rest of the cast. It is well acted, except maybe for Morgus. He is a little hammy. But that's fine. It's classic Who. Bobby says, Genesis is really good but overrated. Caves is an absolute classic, landing in a terrible and troubled era. It shows how good 80s Doctor Who could be with pacey direction and a tight script. Peter Davison works best with quality material, and he is excellent in this one. Ironically, after the entire Davison era constantly referencing regeneration, the regeneration itself is beautifully subtle when it arrives. The other thing, and credit Doctor Who magazine for picking this up, the Doctor and Perry have no real impact on the events of the story. The world they are in has no use for them. That's true. That's true. Much like I just learned watching Big Bang Theory about Raiders of the Lost Ark, even if Indy hadn't been there, stuff would have ended up the same. Pretty much the same here in Caves. If the Doctor had never showed up, the outcome would have been pretty much the same. The core of the story is that they are both dying and trying to survive. There's no planets or people to save, and no heroes either. All of Holmes's characters have their own selfish interests and ambitions forefront. The TARDIS crew have no friends in this story, which is a very good point. God, Robert Holmes. God, I love him. And the Doctor barely knows Perry, but still willing to sacrifice himself for her, making explicitly clear he doesn't know if he will regenerate. We know he will, but it's a character moment and sums up the Fifth Doctor's vulnerability and compassion. Still wounded by Adric's death and determined not to lose another one in his care. That's a good way to look at that. I hadn't thought of that. That he still has Adric's death weighing on him and that he's determined not to let that happen again. That is a good point I hadn't thought of. I like that. Especially considering his last word is Adric. Oh, and it has two of the best cliffhangers ever. And I agree with that. Cave was the peak of its power at the 80s at the time. Colin Baker had no chance after that went out. I do really enjoy that episode 3 cliffhanger as well. Stephen Crane, who is not only one of my subscribers, but one of my top tier patrons, says, I already voiced my complaint about Genesis in another video, but Caves of Androzani is the ultimate nothing would change if we weren't here, which we just mentioned a second ago. It just seems like the story was written so the Fifth Doctor can show a heroic side by saving a companion he barely knows. Interesting. And then Steven says, Genesis is foundational and is one of the best, but I think Caves beats it due to its sharper pacing. Fair enough. Michael Webster, who not only is one of my subscribers, but was my very first patron. I'm always going to be appreciative about that. He was the very first patron on my Patreon, and one of my favorite people to talk to in the comments. Genesis is arguably the story that cemented the show's popularity and elevated Tom Baker to become the Doctor for the general public, certainly pre-2005. Agreed. And Henry says, I don't know, feels different this time, quoting the Fifth Doctor's regeneration. Fair enough. Jeremy says, I love Genesis of the Daleks, but I don't even think it is the best Baker story. Which is fair. My personal favorite is City of Death. Caves of Androzani is better mainly because it doesn't drag in the middle like Genesis. Though, to be fair, there is the omnibus version of Genesis you can watch if you feel that way. Which is something I mentioned when I comment on it. And he said he would love to check out the omnibus version. Yep. It's on the Season 12 box set. Bananas Are Good, which is one of my favorite YouTube names I've ever seen. I love that one. Another one of my regular subscribers says, Genesis is very good if a little overlong and overrated. But Androzani is just so different and dark. There's nothing quite like it before or after. I will give it that. Androzani really is a dark story and very different from a narrative standpoint, as has been mentioned with the Doctor not really having any good side he can choose from. He has no allies here. There's no good guys. Everybody has their own selfish motivations in this story, so the Doctor has no one to turn to for help. It is a dark story, and it doesn't really have a happy ending either, other than the Doctor regenerating, which, if you think about it, the Fifth Doctor dies, so it's not a very happy story. And Nikayako, I'm not sure how he pronounces his name, another one of my regulars. He wants me to do City of Death and Talons of Wing Chai. Fair enough. That would be a tough one. That would be depending on whether I'm voting for which two are objectively better or which two are subjectively better. So yeah, as I mentioned, like I said, while Genesis won the poll pretty much 2-1, 60% compared to 29%, basically 2-1. The comments, Caves overwhelmingly wins in the actual comments, which is interesting. That's not the first time I've seen that happen doing these. They are both masterpieces. Caves, for me, is just because of its dark tone. You guys know I love Robert Holmes, but because of its dark tones and serious nature, it's not quite as rewatchable. It's one that I have to savor like a fine wine. I watch it every 3 or 4 years, maybe once every 5 years, something like that, when I'm in the mood for it. I haven't seen it for a while. Whereas something like, say, Destiny of the Daleks, which to me is fun. It has a rewatchability to it. I can see myself rewatching that once a year simply because it's fun. Even Genesis, with its serious nature, I find a little more fun, even though it's serious. It has more of a rewatchability to it, which is part of the reasons why I would pick Genesis over it. A lot of Doctor Who comes down to rewatchability for me. So yeah, Genesis wins for me as well. So I would like to know, what do you think of this video? So comment down below and let me know. Other things to do, click the like button and the subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you never miss out on another video. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support me on that. There's a link to that down in the description below. I want to give a special shout out to two of my top tier patrons, the Fifth Doctor and Stephen Crane, because I do appreciate their support and the support of all of my patrons. I also have a P.O. box if there is anything Doctor Who related, sci-fi related, or otherwise you would like to send me to watch and review. My P.O. box is down in the description, as well as a link to my Amazon wish list if you would like to check that out. Most importantly though, thank you for watching.